The tears cascaded down Willow Duncan's cheeks, mingling with the rushing waters of the Arkansas River as she knelt on the muddy bank, her black mourning dress soaking up the moisture from the ground. Colorado Territory, 1871, had taken everything from her husband, her home, and now her will to continue. 3 days had passed since they'd lowered James's body into the unforgiving earth, victim of a mine collapse that had claimed 11 souls in the boomtown of Silver Creek. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, casting long shadows across the landscape as Willow clutched her husband's pocket, watched the only memento she had left of him. At 24, widowhood felt like a sentence worse than death. The homestead they'd built together sat empty now, a hollow reminder of shattered dreams. She didn't hear the approaching hoofbeats over her sobs, didn't notice the tall figure dismounting from a chestnut mare until his shadow fell across her trembling form. "Madam," the voice was deep, gentle. "You shouldn't be out here alone. Night's coming fast." Willow turned her tear-stained face upward, meeting eyes as blue as the Colorado sky. The stranger wore trail-worn clothes, a dusty hat pushed back on his head, revealing sandy brown hair. A cowboy, by the looks of him, with a kind face etched with concern. "Leave me be," she whispered, turning back to the rushing water. "There's nothing left for me now." Instead of retreating, the man crouched beside her. "I don't believe that's true," he said softly. "The river's no place for grieving. It takes too much already." When she made no move to stand, he surprised her by sliding one arm beneath her knees and another around her shoulders, lifting her from the muddy bank as if she weighed nothing. Willow was too exhausted to protest. "I'll carry you home," he whispered, his breath warm against her hair. "Whatever burdens you bear, you don't have to carry them alone." Something in his words penetrated the fog of her grief. Willow looked up at the stranger's face, finding no pity there, only understanding. "My name is Cole Prescott," he said, setting her gently on her feet but keeping a steadying hand at her elbow. "I've got a wagon just up the path. Let me take you back to town." "Willow," she replied, her voice barely audible above the river's rush. "Willow Duncan." Cole nodded, as if committing her name to memory. "Mrs. Duncan, I'm mighty sorry for whatever's brought you to this river's edge, but I'd consider it a personal favor if you'd let me see you safely home." The kindness in his voice nearly undid her again. She nodded weakly, allowing him to guide her up the path to where a wagon waited, his mare tethered behind. "Silver Creek," she managed to say, indicating the direction of the mining town. Cole helped her onto the bench seat before climbing up beside her. "I know it, was heading there myself." As the wagon began to move, Willow stole glances at her rescuer. His profile was strong, jaw shadowed with several days' worth of beard. His hands were calloused but gentle on the reins. "Are you passing through?" she asked, finding her voice. "Planning to stay a while," he replied. "I've been hired to help drive a cattle herd that's coming through next month. Need to find work in town until then." Willow nodded absently, her thoughts drifting back to her predicament. The boarding house wouldn't extend her credit much longer. Without James's income from the mine, she had precious few options. "You lost someone," Cole said. "It wasn't a question, my husband. The mine collapse." Cole removed his hat, holding it respectfully against his chest for a moment. "I heard about that in the last town. I'm truly sorry, Mrs. Duncan." "Thank you," she whispered, the words feeling hollow and inadequate. They rode in silence until the lights of Silver Creek appeared in the distance. The small mining town was still bustling despite the recent tragedy, saloons and shops illuminated against the darkening sky. "Where should I take you?" Cole asked as they entered the town limits. "The boarding house on Pine Street," Willow replied, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. She'd already sold their small homestead to pay for James's burial. Cole guided the wagon through the muddy streets until they reached Mrs. Henderson's boarding house. Before Willow could climb down, Cole was there, offering his hand. "Thank you, Mr. Prescott," she said formally. "I'm in your debt." "No debt between neighbors," he replied with a small smile, "though I admit I'm looking for lodgings myself, Mrs. Henderson, a stout woman with a perpetually worried expression, appeared on the porch. "Willow Duncan, I was about to send someone looking for you, and who might this be?" "Cole Prescott, madam," he answered, tipping his hat. "Just arrived in town, looking for work and a place to stay." Mrs. Henderson's expression brightened. Well, we've got a room available. $5 a week includes breakfast and supper, Cole nodded. That'll suit me fine. Willow felt a strange mixture of relief and apprehension knowing he would be staying under the same roof. She excused herself quickly, retreating to her small room on the second floor where she sank onto the narrow bed, emotionally exhausted. Morning brought no relief from her grief, but Willow forced herself to rise, wash her face, and pin up her auburn hair. She had exactly 2 weeks' worth of savings left, not enough to sustain her, let alone afford passage back east to her distant relatives. At breakfast, she found Cole already seated in the dining room, conversing easily with Mr. Finch, the town's aging blacksmith. She slipped into a chair at the far end of the table, hoping to avoid conversation, but Mrs. Henderson had other ideas. "Willow, dear, Mr. Finch was just saying he could use an extra pair of hands at the smithy," the landlady announced. "And I mentioned you're quite skilled with bookkeeping, having helped your husband with his mining claims." Willow looked up, startled. "I couldn't possibly now, Mrs. Duncan," Mr. Finch interrupted gently. "I'm getting on in years and my ledgers are in a frightful state. 2 hours each morning is all I'd need. The pay isn't much, but it's honest work." Cole watched the exchange silently, his blue eyes observant. When Willow hesitated, he spoke up. "It's a good opportunity, Mrs. Duncan, a way to stay in town until you decide your next steps." Something about his encouragement steadied her. "Thank you, Mr. Finch, I accept your offer." After breakfast, Willow found herself walking alongside Cole as they both headed into town. She to the blacksmith shop, he in search of work. "You did well in there," he said, "taking that position." "I have little choice," she replied honestly. "My funds are nearly depleted." Cole nodded thoughtfully. "I understand that predicament well enough. Been riding from job to job since the war ended. You fought?" Willow asked, noticing for the first time a certain rigidity in his posture that spoke of military training. "Union cavalry," he confirmed. "Came west afterward. Couldn't settle back home in Pennsylvania after everything I'd seen." They reached the blacksmith shop and Willow paused. "Thank you again, Mr. Prescott, for yesterday, Cole," he corrected with a gentle smile. "And you're welcome, Willow." The way he said her name sent an unexpected warmth through her chest, a feeling that immediately triggered guilt. James was barely cold in his grave. She had no business noticing another man's smile or the kindness in his eyes. The next 2 weeks established a routine. Each morning, Willow would work at the blacksmith shop, organizing Mr. Finch's chaotic accounts. In the afternoons, she began taking in mending from townspeople, a skill her mother had insisted she master. Cole found work at the livery stable, where his way with horses quickly earned him the owner's respect. Occasionally, Willow would pass by and catch glimpses of him working shirt sleeves rolled up, muscles flexing as he shoed a difficult horse or repaired a stall. Their paths crossed at breakfast and supper, where they exchanged pleasantries but little else. Willow maintained her distance, protected by the shield of her grief. Yet she couldn't help noticing how Cole would pull out her chair, or how he'd ensure she received the serving platters first, or the way his eyes would seek hers across the table. One evening, nearly 3 weeks after their first meeting, Willow was returning from delivering mended shirts when the skies opened. The sudden downpour caught her halfway between town and the boarding house, and she ran for cover under the awning of the general store, clutching her shawl around her shoulders. "Looks like you could use this," came a familiar voice. Cole appeared beside her, offering his duster coat. "I couldn't, you'll be soaked," she protested. "Already am," he grinned, water dripping from his hat brim. "Besides, it's just water, I won't melt." Reluctantly, she accepted the coat, wrapping it around her shoulders. It carried his scent leather, horses, and something distinctly him. "Where were you headed?" she asked. "Coming to find you, actually," he admitted. "Mrs. Henderson was worried when you didn't return for supper." The thought that he'd come looking for her specifically sent a flutter through her chest that she immediately tried to suppress. "I had more deliveries than expected," she explained. "Mrs. Parker had 6 shirts that needed mending." Cole nodded, looking out at the rain. "Doesn't seem to be letting up. We should make a run for it when you're ready." Willow hesitated, then nodded. "On the count of 3. Cole's smile brightened his entire face. 1, 2, 3, they dashed into the downpour, Willow clutching his coat around her shoulders as they splashed through puddles. Halfway to the boarding house, her foot caught in a rut and she stumbled. Cole's arm shot out, catching her around the waist before she could fall. For a moment, they stood frozen in the rain, his arm secure around her, their faces inches apart. Raindrops clung to his eyelashes, and Willow felt something shift inside her, a crack in the wall of grief she'd built. "Careful," he murmured, his voice deeper than usual. Willow stepped back, breaking the contact. "We should hurry," she said, her voice unsteady. They reached the boarding house soaked to the skin. Mrs. Henderson clucked disapprovingly, sending them both upstairs to change before supper. As Willow reached the top of the stairs, she turned to hand Cole back his coat. "Thank you," she said softly. "Anytime," he replied, his eyes holding hers a moment longer than necessary. That night, Willow lay awake, troubled by her conflicting emotions. James had been gone barely a month. Her grief was still raw, yet she couldn't deny the warmth that Cole's presence brought to her days. The guilt was suffocating. The next morning, she avoided the breakfast table, slipping out early to the blacksmith shop. "Mr. Finch noticed her distraction but said nothing as she fumbled through the ledgers. "Got a letter for you," he said eventually, placing an envelope on the desk. "Came with yesterday's mail." Willow recognized her sister-in-law's handwriting immediately. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal and read the brief message. James's family in Boston wanted her to return east to live with them as a companion to his ailing mother. The train ticket was enclosed. It was a solution to her financial problems, yet the thought of leaving Silver Creek, of leaving Cole, sent an unexpected pang through her heart. "Bad news?" Mr. Finch asked, noticing her expression. "No," she said quickly. "An opportunity, actually. My husband's family has invited me to Boston." Mr. Finch nodded slowly. "Fine city, Boston, different from our little town, though." "Yes," Willow agreed, folding the letter carefully. "Very different." That evening at supper, Cole immediately sensed something was wrong. He waited until the other boarders had dispersed to the parlor before approaching her. "You've been avoiding me," he said quietly as she helped Mrs. Henderson clear the dishes. "I've been busy," Willow replied, not meeting his eyes. "Busy enough to skip breakfast and eat lunch alone." His voice held no accusation, only concern. Willow set down the stack of plates she was holding. "I received a letter today from my husband's family in Boston. They want me to join them there." Something flickered across Cole's face, disappointment quickly masked. "I see, and will you go?" "It seems the sensible choice," she said, still not looking at him. "I have nothing keeping me here." Cole was silent for a long moment. "When would you leave?" "The ticket is for next week's train." He nodded, his expression carefully neutral. "Then I wish you safe travels, Mrs. Duncan." The formality of his address stung more than Willow expected. She watched him walk away, fighting the urge to call him back, to explain the confusion in her heart. The next few days passed in a blur of preparations. Willow gave notice to Mr. Finch, who accepted her resignation with genuine regret. She packed her few belongings and wrote a thank-you note to Mrs. Henderson for her kindness during the difficult weeks. Cole kept his distance, polite, but reserved when their paths crossed. The warmth that had begun to grow between them seemed to have withered, leaving a hollow ache in Willow's chest. 2 days before her scheduled departure, Silver Creek received news that the cattle drive Cole had been hired for was arriving early. He would be leaving the following morning, a day before Willow's own departure. That evening, Willow sat on the boarding house porch, watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant oranges and reds. The sound of boots on the wooden steps alerted her to Cole's presence before he spoke. "Beautiful evening," he remarked, leaning against the porch railing. "Yes," she agreed, stealing a glance at his profile. "I heard you're leaving tomorrow." Cole nodded. "Trail boss sent word they need hands sooner than expected. Cattle are restless after the recent storms." Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. "Willow," he finally said, turning to face her fully, "I want you to know that he stopped, seeming to reconsider his words. "I hope you find happiness in Boston." "Thank you," she whispered, her throat tight with emotion. Cole straightened, tipping his hat. Good night then, and goodbye, Mrs. Duncan. As he turned to leave, something broke loose inside Willow. Wait, she called, rising from her chair. Cole paused, his hand on the door. Willow faltered, the words catching in her throat. I don't know if I want to go to Boston. He turned slowly, his expression guarded. Why's that? Because it doesn't feel right, she admitted, taking a step toward him. Nothing has felt right since James died. Except, she hesitated, gathering her courage, except for when you found me by the river, when you carried me home. Cole's eyes softened. Willow, I feel guilty, she continued, the words tumbling out now, for even thinking of another man when my husband is barely in his grave. For feeling something when you look at me. It's too soon, and yet, Cole echoed, moving closer, some things can't be measured in time. I don't know what to do, she confessed, tears welling in her eyes. Cole reached out, his calloused fingers gently brushing a tear from her cheek. You do what feels right in your heart. If that's Boston, then go with my blessing, but if it's not. The unspoken possibility hung between them. I need time, Willow whispered. Cole nodded, understanding in his eyes. Time is something I can give. I'll be back in Silver Creek when the drive ends, about 6 weeks from now. He hesitated, then added, if you're still here, I'll come find you. If not, I'll understand. With that, he gently squeezed her hand and walked away, leaving Willow alone with her thoughts in the fading light of day. Morning dawned clear and cool, the first hint of autumn in the air. Willow rose early, driven by a restlessness she couldn't explain. From her window, she could see activity at the livery stable as cowboys prepared to depart with the cattle drive. She dressed quickly, her hands fumbling with the buttons of her dress. Before she could question her actions, she was hurrying down the stairs and out into the street, walking briskly toward the livery. Cole was adjusting the saddle on his chestnut mare when she approached. He looked up, surprise evident on his face. Willow, he said, straightening. I didn't expect to see you this morning. I couldn't let you leave without, she paused, suddenly uncertain, without saying a proper goodbye. Around them, cowboys mounted up, the cattle drive beginning to organize at the edge of town. I'm glad you came, Cole said softly, his eyes searching hers. I tore up the ticket, Willow blurted out, the words surprising even her. Last night after we talked, I'm not going to Boston. Hope flared in Cole's eyes. Are you sure? Your husband's family, they're good people, Willow acknowledged, but they're not my future. I don't know what my future holds, but I know I need to find out here, not there. Cole took a step closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. I'll be back in 6 weeks, he promised. Will you be here? Yes, she whispered, certainty finally settling in her heart. I'll be here. A call came from the trail boss, signaling it was time to move out. Cole hesitated, then reached into his pocket, pulling out a small carved wooden bird. Made this last night, he said, pressing it into her palm. A little reminder that even after the darkest winter, spring returns. Willow closed her fingers around the carving, touched by the gesture. Be safe, she said. Cole's eyes held hers for a long moment. Then, with a gentleness that took her breath away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to her forehead. 6 weeks, he whispered against her skin. Then he was mounting his horse, tipping his hat to her one last time before riding to join the others. Willow watched until the dust cloud raised by the cattle had disappeared from view, the wooden bird warm in her hand. The following weeks brought changes to Willow's life. She continued working for Mr. Finch, who was delighted by her decision to stay. She moved from the boarding house to a small room above the milliner's shop, saving every penny she could. As summer gave way to autumn, Willow found herself smiling more, the crushing weight of grief gradually lightening. She still wore her mourning dress, still visited James's grave each Sunday, but she no longer felt as if she were drowning in sorrow. Letters arrived from Cole, brief but meaningful messages carried by riders who passed between the cattle drive and town. He wrote of the trail, of the stars above the plains, of his hopes for the future. Willow kept each letter tied with a ribbon in a small box beside her bed. 5 weeks after Cole's departure, a fire broke out in the livery stable. The entire town formed a bucket brigade, fighting to save the building and the horses inside. Willow worked alongside everyone else, passing buckets until her arms ached and smoke stung her eyes. By dawn, the fire was extinguished, but the stable was badly damaged. Mr. Patterson, the livery owner, surveyed the charred timbers with despair. "I can't afford to rebuild," he admitted to the gathered townspeople. "Not before winter," Willow, exhausted and soot-covered, spoke up. "What if we all helped? A community effort?" The idea took root. Within days, a rebuilding plan was organized. Men contributed labor, women prepared meals for the workers, and children helped where they could. Willow took charge of coordinating supplies and donations, discovering an organizational talent she hadn't known she possessed. A week later, with the new roof nearly complete, a rider galloped into town with news. The cattle drive was returning early, having sold their herd at a better price than expected. They would arrive the following day. Willow's heart raced at the news. She spent that evening washing her hair, pressing her best dress, still black, but trimmed with a touch of navy blue ribbon, her first tentative step away from deep mourning. The next morning, Willow joined the townspeople who gathered to welcome the returning cowboys. Dust on the horizon announced their approach long before the men themselves became visible, and then, suddenly, there he was. Cole rode at the front of the group, his hat pushed back, his face tanned from weeks in the sun. His eyes scanned the crowd until they found her, and the smile that broke across his face was like sunrise after the longest night. He dismounted in one fluid motion, handing his reins to another rider without taking his eyes off Willow. The crowd seemed to part between them as he walked toward her, dust-covered and weary but with purpose in every step. "You're here," he said simply when he reached her. "I promised I would be," she replied, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. Cole glanced at the half-rebuilt livery stable, then back at her. "Seems I've missed some excitement." "Just a small fire," Willow said with a smile. "Nothing we couldn't handle." Cole raised an eyebrow. "The town, together." She hesitated, then added, "I've found my place here, Cole." A purpose, understanding dawned in his eyes. "That's good to hear." They stood in awkward silence for a moment, the weeks of separation creating a temporary barrier between them. "Would you walk with me?" Cole finally asked. "I've been thinking about what to say to you for 6 weeks, and now I can't remember any of it." Willow nodded, falling into step beside him as they moved away from the crowd toward the quieter outskirts of town. "How was the drive?" she asked. "Dusty, long," Cole glanced at her, "but successful." "I've saved almost enough to make an offer on a small parcel of land outside town. The Patterson place." "The old homestead with the apple orchard?" Willow asked, surprised. Cole nodded. "It needs work, but the soil's good. Could raise horses there, maybe some cattle." He paused. "It's big enough for a family." The implication wasn't lost on Willow. She stopped walking, turning to face him fully. "Cole, I need to be honest with you. I'm not the same woman you found by the river that day. Grief changed me, and these weeks without you, they've changed me too. I've discovered strengths I didn't know I had." "I can see that," he said softly. "It suits you." But she continued, "Some things haven't changed, the way I feel when you're near, the way my heart recognizes something in yours." Cole took a step closer. "Willow, I've known many people in my life, fought alongside men I'd have died for, but I've never met anyone who makes me feel the way you do, like I've found something I didn't even know I was looking for." He reached for her hand, his touch gentle but sure. "I'm not asking to replace what you lost. No one could. I'm just asking for a chance to build something new, together." Willow looked up at him, at the earnestness in his blue eyes, the strength and kindness in his face. She thought of James, of the love they'd shared and the grief that had nearly destroyed her. And she thought of the moment Cole had lifted her from the river's edge, carrying her when she couldn't walk on her own. "I think," she said slowly, "that James would want me to be happy, to live fully." Hope brightened Cole's expression. "And do you think you could be happy with me?" In answer, Willow stepped forward, resting her palm against his cheek. "I'm already halfway there." Cole's smile was radiant as he leaned down, hesitating just before his lips met hers. "May I?" "Please," she whispered, closing the distance between them. His kiss was gentle at first, a question rather than a demand. When Willow responded, her hands finding their way to his shoulders, the kiss deepened, becoming a promise of healing, of new beginnings, of love that could grow from the ashes of loss. When they finally parted, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "I think I started falling in love with you the moment I saw you by that river," he confessed. "Even in your grief, there was such strength in you." "And I think I started falling for you when you whispered you'd carry me home," Willow replied. "No one had ever made me feel so safe." They walked back to town hand in hand, the future spreading before them like the vast western sky full of possibility, adventure, and the promise of love that had found them both when they least expected it but needed it most. Winter passed, and spring brought new life to Silver Creek. The apple trees on the Patterson place, now the Prescott homestead, bloomed white against the blue Colorado sky. Cole and Willow were married beneath those blossoms, surrounded by the townspeople who had become their family. Willow wore a dress of soft blue rather than morning black, a small locket containing James's portrait tucked beneath the bodice, a private acknowledgement that love doesn't replace love, but rather creates room for more. As Cole slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, he whispered words meant only for her. "Thank you for letting me carry you home that day by the river. Now let's build a home together." And as they sealed their vows with a kiss, Willow knew that the river of grief that had once threatened to drown her had instead carried her to a new shore, one where love waited, patient and true, ready to begin again.